Hello everyone, in this video we're going to cover the best base locations in Palworld. Now when it comes to picking a best base location, there are three things to consider. 1. Is it raidable, or what does defense and protection look like? 2. Is it a great scenic location? Does it have a flat buildable space, or is there a cliff for you to shove the Pal Expedition Station? And 3. Does it offer great resources or mining opportunities? So in no particular order, let's get started. Location 1 is a mining base for ore and is especially useful in the early game due to it being so close to the starting area. What also makes this area great is the bridge we had to cross in order to get here is the only way to actually make it over, meaning you are quite protected against raids as well. Then location 2 is in the redwood biome. This area has a chest spawn and a huge piece of flat land. All the pals in the surrounding area are low level, and the only way to get to this plateau is by following a ramp up at the very end, making it a great location to deal with raids as well. Lastly, there is a giant cliff where you can shove the Pal Expedition Station, which helps with managing space. Then location 3 is in the yellow forest. Nestled on a small cliffside, you have another ore mining base, and when you place down your Pal box, you'll have access to essentially the entire lower section and then a portion of the upper section as well. If you want to avoid raids here, all you need to do is build up barricades on the edge of the base on the upper section to prevent enemies from dropping down into your area. Also, being on the cliff edge, you don't need to build barricades on the backside, meaning you have an amazing view of the surrounding area. And then is location 4, which is a large open area with one ore spawn. Then there is a mountain offering protection on one side and the ability to hide the Pal Expedition Station. And then on the opposite side, you are on an elevated cliff. There's only one way to get up to this area, and it's a tiny space at the end, so raids must funnel into you. You will at times find mercenary camps on the lower level like you see here, but I've spent days here in my hardcore randomized playthroughs and had the camp spawn but never actually bother me. Also on top of this mountain is a skill fruit tree. Then location 5 is a large open area in what seems like a lavender field with 2 ore spawns. There is also a chest and a meteor just a short walk away. This area is unfortunately hostile, with direwolves constantly patrolling the area, and there is a mercenary camp nearby, so you will need to build up some barricades to avoid being attacked or raided. But what makes this area great is that this field of flowers is very unique and there's nothing else like it on the entire map. So due to aesthetics, this would be a great location to build a base for farming, ranches, or even a barn or greenhouse build. Then for location 6, we're making a huge jump over to the desert biome. This area is one of the highest points in the area, making it immune to all non-flying raids. It's not very flat, but it's a great resource base. There's 2 oil extractors and 7 coal nodes. Then additionally, there's also 2 chest spawns and a scrap pile spawn just outside the radius of your base. Then for location 7, we're visiting a different desert biome. This is where the Alpha Anubis Pal actually spawns. This area has 6 coal nodes, and you can use the mountain to hide away the Pal Expedition Station. This is a fairly hostile area, so it is advised to build up barricades to prevent random attacks and manage raids. For location 8, we're going to head over to another elevated area. This area has a huge flat space to work with. It also has 2 ore nodes. It's surrounded by bamboo, which adds a nice aesthetic touch. Then when it comes to protection, the entire area is slightly elevated, so there is only one ramp that leads up to this area, making it easy to manage raids. There is also a red chest spawn on this plateau. Then just outside your base, there is a meteor drop location, a sulfur node, and a bounty spawn. Location 9 is a very interesting location, and I have it saved as one of my top 10 favorite spots to want to build in the future. This area has 9 ore nodes and an amazing view of the world tree and many other elements on the map. Now there is 2 ways to get up, and having the Pal box where it is does mean you can only block off 1 within your radius, so you may need to build barricades for defense. But there really shouldn't be anything too dangerous in the area outside of raids. Also, there is a red chest spawn on the hill up to the base, and then there's a nice little water area within the base, which makes this location really stand out. And I'm sure it could look really cool in a well thought out base design. Move on over to location 10. It has 7 ore nodes and is basically just a simple farming base. However, if you're a dedicated builder, you can make this a cliffside base and incorporate the waterfall into the design to make something truly stand out. Also, there is a bounty spawn and a cave entrance at the bottom of the waterfall. You can be raided here from pals dropping down, so you would need to build barricades. Then location 11 has 2 different oil nodes. However, you can't fully include both, so it would be better to just pick one and place 2 extractors down the one to make things simple. But what makes this place truly special is the nightstar sand. Contrary to what a lot of people believe, nightstar sand does not just come out at night. You can only see it at night. However, pals who have the ability to gather things for you can collect it regardless of the time of day. Basically, just drop down a pal like Knocklim, let them wander around, and they will passively grab it day or night as long as it has spawned in. Additionally, pals seem to be able to gather twice as much as we as players can do, meaning a passive farm is the best way to gather this valuable resource. In this area, you're also protected against raids. Then as a cherry on top, you have a skill fruit tree on the hill. Then if you want to make this a double base, on the other side of the hill, there's also 8 coal node spawns. Next up, location 12 is short and sweet. It's got 2 oil locations and 6 coal nodes. It's not pretty or great against raids, but it's a decent decent farming spot. Then we're going to move over to the snow biome for location 13. This area features 8 different crystal nodes and 2 ore nodes, truly an exceptional mining base. It can also be aesthetically pleasing and an awesome place to build a frozen-themed fortress with different levels. You do have a spawn of mercenaries behind the base, but nothing too crazy. Then for protection, you are on an elevated area, so you shouldn't have any raids other than flying raids. I honestly haven't been raided at all at this location, so you should be quite safe here. Moving over to location 14 is another great location for crystal. There are 9 crystal nodes here, and as soon as you defeat the mercenaries who spawn here, this little patch of heaven is all yours with no concerns. There will be no raids, so no defense is needed, which means you can also enjoy the great view that this location offers. Next up is location 15. This is actually 4 different locations, but I'm going to just list it as one because essentially it's down to your preference, and they all offer something very similar. These 4 different locations, all on this side of the snow biome, all have 1 pillar, which allows you to create an elevated base that's supported well, and 1 oil node spawn. So basically, you have lots of room to build a great looking base, and you can use the pillar to help create additional levels with support. It is important to note though that all 4 of these locations being flat on the ground can be raided at any point in time, so you will need to set up some defenses. Next up is location 16, which has 6 crystal node spawns and a cliff that can be used as a spot for the Pal Expedition Station. You are completely safe on one half of the location due to being on a cliff's edge. Then on the other half, you'd want to craft some barricades to stay protected against raids. Then location 17, which is all about aesthetics. Here there is 1 oil spawn with 1 crystal node spawn as well. This area has a nice pillar to build as a center foundation for your base. You can then create an awesome looking base on the edge of the map, far removed from anything else, completely protected by raids on one side. You get an excellent view of the world tree, and you also have the coziness of being in a quiet part of the snow biome with snow-covered trees, making an excellent view that will line the edge of your base. Then location 18 is an odd one, but an amazing one. This is all about mining. There's 8 ore node locations and 6 coal node locations in the lower level of this cliff. By strategically placing our PAL box, you can get all 14 farming nodes within the radius. All you would need to do is build a nice staircase for pals to get up and down, or even just a ladder for you and have 1 chest in each area for pals to transport to. Also, being on the cliff, there are no raids. It may be ugly, but it's quite functional. Then location 19 brings us to where I made my last base build video. This is all about aesthetics and defense. You have the cascading waterfall that flows behind and below your base. There is ample room to build around, a cliff to place down the Pal Expedition Station, and you are completely protected against all raids. There's also a skill fruit tree and a bounty nearby. Up next is location 20, which is quite special and most likely where I will be moving my main base to. So there's a few different ways to approach building a base here. You could simply just use all of the flat space that's available on the top, which means you would be protected from all raids. And then you can then utilize the cliff there in the middle to place down the Pal Expedition Station. However, you could also opt to build a base that utilizes 2 different levels to add even more dimensions to your base. You can stick to the top 2 areas to avoid raids, or you can use the middle and the bottom area to have a nice elevated base with a beachfront property. Or if you're feeling creative, you can take advantage of all 3 levels at once. This is definitely one of my favorite locations for creative ideas. Now, speaking of my main base, that brings us over to location 21, which is a fantastic spot. Don't get me wrong, it's a huge open area surrounded by low-level spawns. And you may not even need protective walls here because I've never actually gotten raided. This has been an amazing spot to just not worry about anything. I'm just in the market for something new. Next up is location 22. I didn't want to include it because I personally don't like the area, but I feel like I need to include it because it's a giant, huge piece of land and it gives you plenty of space to go through and build. And you can even build multiple bases close to each other in this location. I'm just not a huge fan, but it definitely gives you plenty of space to work with. Then location 23 is really cool. It's another great flat piece of land nearby the previous location with an excellent view of the marsh area. You can get raided here, so that is a downside, but for aesthetics, it's a really cool location. I also had a really weird interaction here when recording where a Nightwing was just casually chilling and drinking water until I disturbed it. I've never seen that before, so that was pretty cool. Then location 24 is a very nice flat space, but this time you aren't quite elevated with there being only one way up to your base, so it's significantly easier to defend. You will most likely need to clear out a few trees, but it gives off a really nice forest vibe and has plenty of berry spawns for food in the early game. I've set up base here a few different times in my hardcore randomized playthroughs. Alright, move on over to location 25, and it's all about mining. There's 8 ore node spawns here and 1 coal node as well. There's also a skill fruit tree within the base. I'm honestly not sure if you can get raided here. As a precaution though, I would utilize defenses. Then location 26 is another excellent mining location. You have 2 different spots that you can pick from on this mountain. There's one spot that has 6 ore nodes, and then there's another spot that has 6 coal nodes, and there's also 1 sulfur node nearby. Being on top of the mountain, you should experience absolutely absolutely no raids here as well. Alright, next up is location 27, which takes us over to the volcanic region. This spot, pretty much anyone who's familiar with Palworld whatsoever knows of this location, as it's the only spot in the entire game that allows you to have 3 different oil spawns all within one base. I personally hate it though, which is why you don't see a base here, because I think it's ugly and I hate the lighting in the volcanic region. But if you're all about min-maxing your stats or resources in this specific case, then there's no better spot in the game. Alright, location 28 takes us over to Sakurajima Island. I could technically make nearly every location that has 2 oil spawns on this island a great base spot, and it would be mostly true. However, I settled on 2 locations for this island. I picked this first location with a scenic view of the waterfalls in mind and the cherry blossom trees. There's the 2 oil spawns as mentioned previously, and it has 2 sulfur nodes as well. You can get raided here, so you will need to set up some defenses. Moving on over to location 29 and the second base location on this island. This is where I have my main mining area set up for the time being, but I do need to do some major changes. This area has 2 oil spawn locations, but it's slightly elevated and far more protected than the last area. You can still get raided here, so you will need some protection set up. They basically always come up the main hill leading up to it from the front. You can also push the base back just a little bit to hug the back wall to ensure that side is always safe from raids and enemy pals. And you can also utilize some of the mushrooms in your builds, or simply just have pals passively farm them for you. Alright, now moving on over to location 30, it takes us back to the volcano. I wasn't going to include any other locations for the volcano simply just because I don't like the lighting, but sulfur needs to be addressed. And the best place to farm sulfur, of course, prior to unlocking its mining facility is on the volcano. There are 3 locations that I selected for sulfur. This first location is straightforward, it's got 6 sulfur nodes, and you really only need to cover up 2 small lava areas. You will need defenses for raids, but the main concern here would be the lava. Then location 31 has 3 sulfur nodes and 1 oil spot, as well as a cool statue on the edge of your base. It is advised to block off the sides on this plateau so your pals don't accidentally fall into the lava. Then location 32 has 8 sulfur nodes and 1 ore node. This is easily one of the best places to gather sulfur, but even walking near the lava can catch you or your pals on fire, so you will need to proceed with caution. The best way to avoid any problems with lava whatsoever when mining is to get fire pals that can mine like then you don't need to worry about them dying to the lava. Then location 33 is the last location here on the volcano, and it's purely for aesthetics. You have a really cool statue of Anubis and a cascading waterfall behind it. I did also see a post on Reddit of someone taking the PAL expedition station and shoving it smack in the middle of Anubis' midsection, if you know what I mean. So this base does give you a nice view with some humor as well. Then location 34 brings us over to Faybreak Island, with the first base being the best place to mine Hexolite quartz in the entire game. It's got 3 Hexolite spawns with 1 oil spawn all within the base radius. And being on Faybreak Island, the majority of the spots will require defenses against raids and high-level pals. Then location 35 brings us to a double Hexolite spawn with nightstar sand included in your base radius. I mentioned earlier that any pal who can gather can get it during the day and not just at night, and that remains true. However, upon further testing, it turns out that Nocklum seems to be the only pal who doubles the resources they gather when it comes to nightstar sand. Also, this area is fairly flat with a nice view. Then location 36 brings us over to a more scenic base location. This area only has 1 Hexolite spawn, however by placing your base down on this big flat circle, you are free from harm. It'll stop all spawns from happening on this little cliff, and nothing here can raid you. Also, you've got an excellent view of the oil rig, so you can dream about all of those lucky drops that you haven't got yet. And the surrounding area also offers some great sightseeing. Then location 37 brings us to another double Hexolite and oil spawn location. This area is pretty hostile, so you will for sure need defenses, but it's a great environment to be in, as there's also a bounty spawn nearby, as well as 4 Chromite spawns just outside of your base. Then location 38 is quite an interesting one. Only a few people will choose to build here, as you have to be quite creative to make something happen. But for those of you that are creative or simply willing to take the time to make every piece go through and work together, you can build a massive base in this enormous tree. I personally have not built here yet because I just haven't had the time, but it's definitely something I'm considering in the future. Then location 39 has 2 Hexolite spawns in a fairly flat area. You will need defenses, as most bases do on this island, but it's a great spot for mining, and it's also got a decent view. Then location 40 is on a cliff with 1 Hexolite spawn and 1 oil spawn, but it's fairly safe, and the only concerns you would ever have here is if raids drop down onto your base, and that can be mostly prevented with some strategic placement on walls. Also, being on a cliff, you have a nice view of the surrounding area, and you can utilize a cliff to place the PAL expedition station. Well, and that's all 40 of the best base locations that I managed to come up with. That's not to say there's not more. I could have easily added 20 through 30 more locations. Drop down in the comments and let me know, what is your favorite best location of all time, be it in this video or one I didn't mention. And if you want to see a part 2, please let me know. Lastly, if you enjoyed this video, then consider checking out some of my other Palworld content.